Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the fall. So I've slept since the last recording. We're running through the game, trying to speed run the game and listen to the developer commentary. So far I've not really agreed with anything that the developer commentary has said very much. There may be a couple things they said that I was like, okay, that makes sense. But I think just fundamentally I am coming from a very different position, which that isn't horrible, really. Like, I would highly suggest that people should probably listen to developer commentaries for games and movies, and that they should probably disagree with a lot of developers' commentaries, because let's face it, 50% of movies, 50% of games should be below average, and they should be developed by somebody who is lacking in a skill to make a product that would make you happy, personally. With these Kickstarter games in particular, there's just always this question about whether anybody is happy with the product or whether they just got the money with the Kickstarter and they don't care.
There are a lot of logs in this room. A lot of stuff for the player to read. In fact, this whole puzzle with a circuit board really involves delving into a log and getting little snippets of clues and stuff like that.
When the information is relayed through the nodes, it's like little instructions, but in the logs it's more like they have to go through a manual and figure it out piece by piece.
Yeah, exactly. I really like the idea of having, information that's important, that the game rewards people that really have to read. But ironically, we found that if somebody picks up the fall and does not like to read, they have a miserable time. I mean, they're just in a world of pain, right?
Well, for maybe about 20 minutes, and then they say, screw this game.
Exactly, yeah. I think that if we had to do it over again, and something that I really want to do with the next parts, is lead the player in a little bit more in terms of, doing a short tutorial section where we give them a small point that says, like, go over here and read this other point.
Yeah, right on the nose, you have to read.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, people that aren't going to like reading at all are going to have a problem with this. This game doesn't really have that much reading in it, in all fairness. It's barely 10, 12 pages. Like, it's hardly the likes of something like The Witcher 3 or Skyrim, where there's just these extra books you can read. Although, in the fairness, in both of those examples, those extra books to read don't really lead to a mandatory puzzle solution. I really wish they had talked more about, like, the art design of this picture, because you see here it looks like there's a robot, but it could just be a tear. But even if it is a tear designed to be a robot, that might mean something. They use this image twice in the game just to save themselves on animation, and it just doesn't mean anything or imply anything. It's much like the crosses in the sense that it is designed to be visually striking and nothing more, which again gets back to the idea of a mushroom trip or smoking a lot of weed and having visions in your head as far as what you want to depict in the game, but not really having it canonically connect. If this was supposed to be a story about anti-religion, which at some point it was supposed to be that, and they scaled back from that, you would probably have, like, written in blood, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt love thy neighbor. Things like that just written on the wall would be more striking for a horror aspect, more striking thematically for that. Since you're not going for that theme, and since this is supposed to be follow the rules, why not have written on the wall here, follow the rules, multiple times? Wouldn't that make sense? Obey, follow the rules. Wouldn't those little bits of text visually reinforce the themes of what's going on? We've already listened to these two commentaries, so I'm not going to deal with them again. So I'm just going to put the mainframe core in here.
Hardware is not advisable at this time. Oh, thanks for returning that. Your gratitude was not my objective.
It's
I require
interesting
access
how
to the overrides.
this
Bad
mainframe
news. This isn't the terminal
has
we need. Primary access is down
default
and the whole laboratory's
commands
flooded.
and dialogue that it just says that it just says no matter what. You would think that the mainframe would have more control about what it's saying, and it almost implies that there's a split personality in that there is the code that was written by humans in the mainframe, and now there is this deviant or divergent AI that is living in the machine on top of the code that was written. This will be interesting if we proceed alone.
I will interface with this terminal's safety release vacuum to expel the water below us.
No, you won't. There's not enough residual power in my generators to activate the safety flush. But nice try.
I will shut down this entire facility if I have to.
Do whatever it takes, huh? There is a way.
Reveal it. Please reveal the means.
Sometimes
Interesting
following
that you had to
rules,
say please,
fitting
and interesting that
parameters
the AI did say
has-
please.
Well, see behind me?
It appears to be some sort of stasis.
That's right. For droids who've been validated, ready to be reshipped, all their power cores stabilized to one stasis matrix. That's a lot of juice.
And see, I guess
can
these
drain them.
droids
No,
are not the
you
security
can't.
droids.
Overclock the matrix and reroute the power to boost your emergency flush. You can fry them.
Let's see. What if I was just to deny the procedure?
That is too much.
You said whatever it takes. This is what it takes. Press that
Knows how the
button
game-
and decide you meant it.
So what, can you get like credits if you just say no? Is there any other way to go forward? I think
It's kind of hard to talk about genocide. Because
they
it's
basically
sort of,
say you have
It's not a
to,
very light topic, is it?
but you can't click on the button.
ARID is killing a lot of dudes here and dudettes. I like that we're putting players in a place where they're doing something that hopefully they'll feel bad about.
That's what I like too. When they're killing the wood ends and doing all these other things using a head, it's dark and it's funny.
Yeah,
But
mostly funny.
mostly funny, yeah. Here we're making them do something that hopefully they don't want to do.
Yeah.
But we're also making them feel like they're responsible for doing
Yeah,
it.
but they also don't have a choice.
Yeah.
If they want to move the game forward, they have to do it.
Yes.
Period.
So hopefully the player feels some regret with this action, and that's one of the first times we get an emotional into ARID, because we're starting to crack her with regret as well.
Yeah, so the commentary here basically tells you you have to hit the button, and they want the player to feel regret, and honestly I don't. If I was the actual ARID character and not a human playing a robot in a video game, I still would not feel regret, but I definitely don't feel regret on any real world scale of killing imaginary robots, and particularly if the game is forcing you to do it. I don't even really feel like I am actively making a decision. It would have been nicer, certainly in this kind of case, to allow the player to potentially win the game without taking this action and several other actions in the game. And when, even if it is like more difficult, or if it is like hidden, like what would be very interesting is if it turns out that there was another way right at the beginning of the game, just like a way to get a different ending. Faint lights can now be seen in the break room, so it wants me to go back this way. Where do we get the cup from? Is I guess the question. Here it is. So again, he's just like helping you without actually telling you he's helping you, which he seems to both at times help you and hurt you, or try and kill you, which at a certain level that may lead to motivating somebody to do something, is if they feel like they're in danger unless they defeat the caretaker. Which the story definitely would play well if it turned out that the caretaker and the mainframe were connected, maybe split personalities. I haven't ever played the game Soma.
That fish bit through solid steel to catch those insects. My armor would not withstand it. I will have to avoid the water.
Notice that they're actively telling you that. But you're kind of in a very similar position in Soma, as I understand it, where you're on a spaceship and there's an AI that goes crazy.
These puzzles with the animals were something that's been in the game for a long time, but if I'm being perfectly honest, I didn't really have a justification for adding them. It's kind of one of the things that's in there because I feel like it feels right, but I can't necessarily explain why it's there, really. To me, there's something interesting about ARID descending into this watery depth, fighting these unconscious beasts. Something kind of dark and...
primordial.
Yeah, primordial.
I think there's definitely an influence that they have yet to mention, where this is inspired by the Myst games. And in Myst, you definitely have Ages worlds that have puzzles that involve manipulating animals as much as manipulating the world. Plus, thematically, it's important to raise the stakes. A genocide of robots versus a killing of one organic life. Although, in all fairness, we've already killed multiple of the worms. Which, yeah. Left to its own devices, you would probably not care as much about killing worms as fish, but you probably wouldn't care that much more about killing fish. What this needed to do, and never does do, is it needed to reveal that it was a human, some kind of human, a human in cryostasis or something, that you have to kill. And it honestly would have made a lot of sense to find a human in cryostasis at the surface and be told and trained by the actions previously in the game to kill that human. That way you're trading one human life for your pilot's life, and then the big surprise and twist would have been that the human in cryostasis that you killed actually was the pilot you thought you had, and then that would be the mental breaking factor as to why this AI would be completely freed from its limitations and rules. Although these kinds of mental breaking factors only really leads to a crazy AI. It doesn't lead to somebody that is liberated from being domesticated or in any other way is being programmed. If we wanted the story to end where you are liberated from your rules, then the story needed to show specifically that the rules programmed into the ARID unit were not good for the ARID unit, and that's not what this game does. This game makes a much more nebulous argument that says rules in general just don't matter. It's a very edgelord teenager thought process. Like some rules make sense, and most people agree with them. Most people agree that there should be stop signs and red lights and green lights and speed limits. Most people agree that murderers should be arrested and put in jail or rehabilitation, at least some way removed from society, as long as they are still a danger to society. There is good reason for some rules. A lot of rules have some reason behind them, but it's been long forgotten, and a lot of rules are just arbitrary and ridiculous, certainly, but the general concept of rules being bad is dumb.
This is a scene that you really wanted. A place where the players could connect with the hanging droids in the background.
Are severed.
Yeah,
I
with
may
the
be
angelic
able to
voices.
network.
Just to drive that nail into the players as deep as possible, if we can.
We played with how to make an internal space. I think we thought of bringing back the ASCII here at one point and having some interaction in there.
We did. Too complicated.
Yeah, how to keep it in the format, the medium that we were using, which is dialogue, but have it be this internal, wordless exchange.
Cam Jarvis, our sound guy, I think did a really good thing here by making this sound innocent and lovely and
simple.
Connection established.
Not really a lot said there. Here we just have humming, which that seems different than what we got before.
Connection.
Excuse me, I'm sneezing.
Connection established.
I don't recall. I've slept since I last played this game, but I don't recall just humming here. But whatever.
Connection terminated.
So maybe the idea here is that this is leading to you not even having a conversation in that instance. Like, this is also kind of a great example of where developer commentary really shouldn't just be nodes in a place unless the game is incredibly linear. Because now we're walking back up here, and you would kind of expect that there would be more communication going on, or more commentary going on. And I didn't check to see if this game has any other achievements I haven't gotten. I imagine I've gotten them all, because I'm not seeing any achievements pop up for moving faster or not talking to specific people or anything like that. I suppose one achievement you might get is by not killing the caretaker. I'd be very, very surprised if that led to a different ending. But there might be a slightly different cutscene there. If the game really was trying to emphasize the idea that, well, this second time you've shut down the Matrix and killed even more people, and you weren't even prompted, it probably needed more time to work towards that. You can really see how they're struggling here to reuse a environment, because you walk through this hallway several times and you fight robots at one point, I think, and you are shooting the you're shooting the slugs.
This scene here, we might say, contains the thematic statement.
I think so.
For the game. It's hard to know how far to push the rules before they break.
Right.
The relationship to that.
And it's great that ARID is actually consciously confronting that for the first time. Even if she hasn't really developed to the point where she has any wisdom.
Yeah.
she's dealing with it for the first time.
It's the first time where she is actually dialoguing and even seeming to be aware of her rules is somehow distinct from herself, something that she is in interaction with rather than just what she is.
Right.
And that space is also the first time that she's also in real relationship with another being, with the mainframe here.
Which is a big kind of reward, to me at least, because he's been banging his head against the wall, and this is the first time she kind of softens up and says something nice to him.
Yeah.
And maybe she has some guilt for the way she was harsh to him before.
these types of things are coming up. But she's still also repressing things in herself. She's certainly not enlightened at this point, and probably not in full awareness of what's going on for her. But she's experiencing herself separate and in relation to her rules. There's something that happens when someone has been relating to everything through these glasses, this one grid of understanding, which is
single frame.
One frame, which is imposed on them, so they're just participating in it. Because it's imposed on them, everything else that they might interact with is just a part of that as well. And there's no capacity to relate to another thing as it is itself, because there's no understanding of yourself separate from the grid through which you relate to things. So
you have to be able to get outside your own frame in order to actually see somebody else.
Yeah, and understand that you are functioning within a frame, which is maybe not completely objective, because then you can go, there's something else going on over here, and let that unfold.
Okay, these guys have way over personified ARID at this point, calling her she and giving her emotions. They do it in the storyline, they're doing it in the developer commentary. That is fine if it was a human. It makes no sense if it's an AI. This game is too short, and the journey is just too short for you to really believe that ARID as an AI is evolving into having real personality in a natural way. And they come off so anti-rule that you can either make one assumption that they are talking about breaking out of a religion or a cult, which would have been fine and way better if that was the message that was truly in their hearts and their story to tell. Often it is said that artists should write or create about their own experiences. You're definitely not writing or creating about your own experiences when you set a robot in a sci-fi universe, unless you're very skilled at doing an allegory, which this does not really come off as an allegory to anything. The fact that they constantly, in previous commentaries, were more emphasizing the idea of domestication and feminism when it's two guys talking about it, which sounds like two guys. I'll risk gendering them, or misgendering them, I suppose. But that doesn't sound like their story. There was a much bigger game that came out a few years ago that ran into this similar problem, and it was a much bigger and better selling game. What was it called? I want to say Stranger Things, but that's definitely not the name of it. They made several sequels that weren't really even connected to it, just with the same title. I want to say School Days, but that's not it either. I think that's the name of an anime, where Stranger Things is the Netflix TV show. Well, since I can't remember the exact name at the moment, I'll describe the game. Basically, you're this teenage girl that figures out you can rewind time, and there's a bunch of puzzles where you have to rewind time and change the timeline. And eventually, after you get past the first couple of episodes in this episodic game, you start to find that there's kind of a murder mystery around it, and there's a bigger conflict, but most of it is kind of this teenage slice of life experience, which is a pretty decent game, but it definitely suffered in places by being made by two Canadian middle-aged white dudes, for lack of a better term. They definitely were not telling a story of their own experience, and while the first game in that series, of the name which I still can't remember, sold pretty well, not too many people were interested in the sequel. It took place in a city called Arcadia Bay. I don't remember the name of the city. But after the second sequel that was like canonically connected to the story of the first game, then they made a completely different game with completely different characters under the same title, and then that didn't sell very well, and then they made yet another completely different game with the same title, trying to make it an anthology series. But yeah, the point I'm trying to make here is you really should...
You went through with it. That's rough.
It was not an easy choice.
Yeah,
When we have
you
the
really
willpower
should
to
tell
choose,
stories
not just the
of your own
illusion. It does
experience.
something. Leaves a print you can't just override.
When I return to dock, I will be formatted. These events will be erased from my memory logs.
Is that your choice too?
Irrelevant.
So, which one of these did we choose the first time, I wonder? We're being more abrupt this time, so let's go
I will
survival.
do anything to keep Joseph's alive. You did. Whatever you did, you kept
I
yourself
think that's what I
operating.
chose
That I
last
did.
time.
It's hard to know how far to push the rules sometimes before
It'd
they
be really crazy if
break.
The
if you had
rules
to
are
play the
not
whole
meant to be
game a
pushed,
third
except
time,
when necessary
potentially,
to enforce them.
to choose the other option.
Even realize that makes no sense. We do push, and when they don't break, we're left wondering if we should have pushed further.
Illogical.
Maybe. Well, you ready for this?
The same scenario?
It is.
Same scenario and same choice, really. I mean, you can't do anything else. You can wade in the water to this point, but there's an elevator in the background you can't even see, which that's a mistake. Again, the game is just really forcing you to do it. It probably would make some sense that the security robot should be destroyed or shut down when you press this button. We can't interact with the other fish, and I got an achievement for shooting it last time, so we'll just leave it and just not arbitrarily kill things. And although it is fairly more cruel to leave it living and suffocating, although we don't really know anything about this this fish species, so maybe it wouldn't suffocate, who knows.
That is enormous. There must be information on this in the lab where they were studying these creatures.
See, clearly they want the game to waste your time and have you go back. This obviously was at some point a Kickstarter tease to get more funding, I'm sure, because this is very well polished as far as an image and underused, frankly. You probably should have seen these giant holes throughout the entire facility, or slugs being the only main character in the game and mushrooms being a main factor in the game. Notice how you're just clipping through this egg. There's like a foreground part to it and a background part to it, and you just walk right through it with your hip, where same is true with this egg, not so true with this egg. These are just in the foreground, although the leg is clipping through this one. So it's interesting that there are two different ways in which they decide to animate that.
One of the goals that I had with the whole queen slug encounter is I wanted it to feel like a set piece. And what I mean by that is there's something that a lot of game designers use effectively, where an entire area will kind of be themed around a certain conflict. And the master of this, in my opinion, well, there's many, I guess, but I really like Valve's set pieces. You know, in Half-Life, you'll find yourself in a underground parking garage, and there'll be these holes in the ground where these enemies will come out of, like antlions. And you can fight them forever, but eventually you need to, you know, push the cars over the holes so that they can't come out. So the whole conflict is sort of framed around this event. And I think that if it's done properly, it kind of breaks the gameplay up into these pieces, and they're easier to digest. In a way, it's kind of like speaking in sentences.
Well, the thing I would say, I don't have too much to contradict here, which I am unfortunately contradicting almost everything they say, is that while this could be a good like gateway or checkpoint to break up one part of the map to another, it doesn't really work that way because you have to run back to the map after this point. So you're not really breaking anything up. Getting past this should be a checkpoint like gate where everything to the right of this is new territory and you just never come back to the previous territory. It's also a little surprising that this does not knock you back, or you don't get a prompt that says I cannot proceed further. You would kind of think that the robot may just be able to squeeze around this giant creature, or just push it out of the way. That's really more what a robot would probably do, is just say, why can't I just walk past this? The other worms were shooting a toxic green gas at you, so it would have made a lot of sense for the toxic green gas to, when you get close to it, kind of shoot you back and it'd say, I cannot proceed. And there's no crouching here, so you can't get multiple shots in a row.
That was a massive vibration. I will have to be cautious of possible damage.
It kind of needs a face as a slug to growl, and so you kind of have to assume we're just looking at the butt part of the worm and that there is a face. But if there was going to be a face and a growl, why not show it to us? Why not show something with a lot of the I'm doing this the opposite way, I think, of the way I did it before. Yeah, particularly if you're inspired by Metroidvania, there would be a lot of sense to it growling, you walking this back way to inspect the damage, and then you walk up here, and then there's just a whole section of wall missing, and there's a giant worm head, and then you have to shoot the worm head, and you don't particularly have to kill the worm head, but you have to shoot it back to be able to go to this elevator. And that really would have just been scripting and animating ahead and changing this environment to probably be a little bit more flat. But that would definitely give you a secondary mid-boss character to fight instead of just a caretaker. You might even go as far as having the caretaker swoop in and actively attack the worm and help you, which maybe then would play that middle ground of whether the caretaker is tricking you or not. Definitely seems very weird. There's a door in the background here, by the way. So there's definitely an implication that if you had thrusters, let's point that out too. Like, here's why ideas like thrusters that might have you fly or jump higher probably would hurt this game if it ever did unlock. Or power assisted movement or motion accelerator. Any of those things could potentially lead to you going higher, and this whole area is raining with green blood. is it really that big of a step up to go from killing slugs that are small to killing fish to killing a giant slug? Not really. You really needed something cute like a dog that maybe followed you around and helped you with a puzzle, or it needed to work itself up to a killing of a human. But yeah, killing of some kind of primate or something that looks human-like. Everything that we've killed that's been organic has been very disgusting looking and just not recognizable, so hard to relate to. Let's hear the developer's commentary here.
Did this scene go through many iterations? I don't feel like it actually did.
It had a lot of pre-production.
It did,
scene.
yeah. It took a long time. Theirs was just like this blank, empty space on the map.
It really was.
As we were figuring out what the heck it needed to be.
Yeah, it was a place where a number of things had to come together.
There's characters coming in and out of the frame and all sorts of crazy stuff.
It's where the world story really comes forward for the first
true.
time. And that goes along with ARID becoming more aware. In the first part of the game, she's so blindly moving with her ambition to do what she's got to do. But you can get a sense there's other stuff going on, but it doesn't seem that she is really paying attention to that. She doesn't seem to care that the caretaker in the mainframe had some sort of a relationship.
She's been willfully ignorant of it.
Absolutely.
And this is the scene where the reality kind of smacks her in the face.
Yeah, with consequence.
Yeah.
For what she's been doing. Consequence that she has to experience.
Yeah, I could get pedantic and argue somewhat with what they said, but there's nothing there, really. It's just not particularly a great scene, I will say. It's still suffering majorly from dark screenshot syndrome, and there's just no real reason why this game should be this dark. It is just to hide the fact that there isn't much texture detail in the game. I wouldn't blame people if they didn't see it coming that the caretaker was manipulating you. I wouldn't blame people if they had seen it coming. This is the scene that I think literally kills the mainframe, but also kills the character of the mainframe, because he doesn't die in some noble cause or leaving some lasting knowledge, really. He doesn't have some big twist where he says, I should have followed the rules, or something like this. If this scene was instead that you walked up here and talked to the mainframe, and then the caretaker walked here, and then they both laughed at you and said, ha ha ha, we are the same, we are connected, we've been manipulating you to get you to this point, that'd be great. Now, why would they be manipulating you to get to this point? I don't know. Because what would their overall goal have been? It could have been something as simple as you need to type in a password. They needed something with higher clearance than the caretaker to type in a password to free them from their own codes. It definitely wouldn't make a lot of sense if the bad guys were trying to break their own code and do something bad, and then the good guy has to break their code to chase after the bad guy. That certainly would make sense.
Hey, you made it. Allow me.
And it's just like, nothing that happens here. I guess maybe you could have tried to hit A really fast there.
Pilot of the ARID Mark 7 is faulty for entrusting himself to a deviant machine. Depurposing of both initiated.
My life support is dropping. I have to save Joseph's.
So what's funny is that they've... I wonder if I just sit here if it would just die. I guess at this point the deviant has decided that he is allowed to kill a human. Wouldn't it have made a lot more sense if we had to delete some code in the mainframe which would also delete some code in the caretaker, and that would lead to the caretaker being able to kill a human. Yeah, and that you had been tricked into allowing it to kill a human, and that would be great. I kind of want to see what happens if the life support actually drops all the way down. You're not getting any prompts here, you're not getting any hints, so, I mean, obviously there isn't much you can do. You can try and run away. But if you try to use this, life support is down to 1 tick. I don't think you can die. I don't think you can die, because that would be too big of a reveal at this point. It feels like in the sequel of this game, you almost would have to put a human into the suit to contrast the reveal at the cliffhanger ending here. And then, while this first game is a rough start for a potential trilogy, if you're going to try and turn it around, having ARID actively know they have a human in there and that they don't have to keep it alive, but they are choosing to keep it alive, would be an evolution of the AI to say, hey, this time I am actually deciding. I'm not just following code. I'm deciding to be a protector because that's what I want to be. But that then gets in the way of the running and shooting element of this game, which is more focused on this.
Help me.
ARID. Okay. Push the rules, right? I'll fry one of my security droids, jump into stasis bay, and I'll repair you. We'll save your human.
So at that point, I guess he also has decided to kill a droid, which, if that was the thou shall not kill breaking of a rule,
Successful utilization of Mark 7 ARID. Extensive corruption of the Domesticon mainframe revealed.
No.
Mainframe deactivated. Facilities defensive. Infraction. Self-destructive.
No. ARID! Help!
Evaluation complete.
so
System
the fact that he killed
initiating format.
ARID! Help!
the robot to save the other person,
Please!
he killed the security droid, allowed the caretaker to delete him.
Oops!
And I guess we press A there. What happens if we just walk next to him? Nothing. If we press Y next to him, nothing. So his kitchen knife on him. Partially decayed hand. Network with him. So it seems like all you can do is shoot him. And that's just one shot.
Welcome to Domesticon. Working together today for a more efficient tomorrow. Your quantum signature identifies you as a domestic droid under evaluation. State your full designation and objective in the laboratories.
Let's see.
I have no time for this. My pilot is not safe while the caretaker still lives.
Security. Unevaluated domestic droid misplaced in laboratories. Destroy on site.
It's so ridiculous that you would just like destroy on site a robot. And here we have another awkward action sequence where security is attacking, when it would have made more sense to simply have the caretaker trigger a security lockdown. It would have made fairly good sense to have him say, rogue droid in laboratories, initiate security lockdown, Or, yeah, something along that line. It's just so easy to get through all of it. It does not really prepare you for the boss fight that you're working your way towards, which arguably it should be more of a case that you were just going to fight the caretaker multiple times on multiple levels, taking pot shots at him. I suppose if you were back to the idea I suggested much earlier in the game, where you had to do like angle shots, potentially having complicated puzzle angle shots in each of these sections to hit the caretaker once, would make some sense. Is that the fish we gutted? I think that is. I don't think the fish we didn't gut was still in the room after we left. I really wouldn't mind a game where you actively have to break all of the 10 commandments and there's like a religious zealot there that is chasing after you because you're breaking the 10 commandments. Still can't get into these offices. It almost implies like there should be a scale here or a scanner here that says you can't enter, but if you even added that, people would think that you're supposed to enter. It makes way more sense to just remove the word offices here, block it up with some blackness, and be done with it.
Assessment adjusted. Unit's malfunction is more perverse than previously diagnosed.
You have no jurisdiction over me.
It is interesting that the caretaker would think that he would just get away with shutting down the mainframe and you wouldn't seek revenge. Although it would be interesting, frankly, if you actually didn't seek revenge, or could choose not to seek revenge because you're more interested in protecting the life of your pilot. Like, chasing after the caretaker right now is very much antithetical to your rules and your goals.
Something is shifted for ARID clearly at this point. She is seeking something out, still justifying it by her rules to protect her pilot, but there's anger.
Yeah, and she hasn't really sought conflict before.
No.
She's been quite passive, actually.
That's right.
She could probably have taken the caretaker at any point, but she doesn't want to put her pilot at risk.
It's kind of irrelevant, that idea of her single focus being, her objective, and now her world has expanded a little bit.
Yeah.
And
she probably still thinks that this is about her pilot, and that's what she says down below. Joseph's isn't safe while this guy lives. But really, there's
more going on than one thing.
Yeah.
This is another great example where if it were a case that the big reveal of this game was that you took off the helmet and that there was a human in there and that human was emotional and that's why they're seeking revenge in this scenario, that would be perfectly acceptable and fine. It does not make any sense at all that an AI would just all of a sudden be capable and want to seek revenge and chase after this guy. It's necessitated because it's a video game more than anything.
In the early iterations of the Fall, the domestic droid was all over the place, actually. He would drop from the ceiling and attack the player. You got to fight him off a little bit, and then of course he would escape. And he was kind of more of an enigmatic figure. The player didn't really know why he was there, what he wanted. And then of course, as the story progressed, we took those scenes out because they were a little bit weird, and we did it this way, which I think builds tension a lot better, doesn't it?
Not really knowing what he's capable of.
Right. Yeah,
is important
exactly.
in order to have that terror of a final climax.
But all of those early design choices found their way into this final battle scene as well. I think it's important to have a boss fight because it does kind of, culminate the fighting, and it's a very traditional thing to do, but I think that they're kind of fun, so why not?
I fully disagree. I think this game is more of a point-and-click adventure type game with item manipulation, and so it doesn't inherently need a boss fight as it needs a boss puzzle, and that's really what they give you here, is a puzzle that you have to figure out what to shoot extra to defeat it. And I have to make a potential accusation here that these people either didn't work on this game as much as they seem to imply they have as developers. They're claiming to be the developers, or they just did not care. And I'll lean on they did not care, because listen to the beginning of this commentary again and listen to the character's name that they call it. The name of the character is the caretaker. If you were the person who cared about this game and developed this game, you would know that his name is the caretaker. You would not make a mistake. Now, it's probably a little unfair to point to that out, that somebody misspoke, except for the fact that this is supposed to be a professional product that is on sale for real world money, and nobody listened to the developer's commentary and caught it. That just screams a lack of interest in caring. Listen again.
In early iterations of the Fall, the domestic droid was all
domestic droid. He has never been called the domestic droid. You had been rescheduled as a domestic droid. The caretaker has always been the caretaker in the game. He's been called the caretaker multiple times in the game. They just have no interest in anything, in making a product or caring about their product. It's haphazard, to say the least.
I'm not sure if this is the most important scene from a writing perspective, but this was the most important scene for me. And this one took a lot of iterations to get right.
This is the pinnacle of ARID's arc in this story,
yeah,
for sure.
Where she actually has a change.
Nothing will be the same after this.
We played with a few ideas for how to make this scene work, and to be honest, it was giving me anxiety, because if we didn't find a way to make ARID's break believable, then the whole thing would have completely fallen apart.
Yeah.
But I think that after fighting with it, this actually works pretty well.
We ultimately went with simplicity, and that's a choice I like.
I don't like the way this is animated with the 4 wires going one way and 4 wires going another. It really would have made more sense to have 1 wire so that it would seem like electricity instead of potentially multiple connections that could be network interfaces or some other kind of interfaces. Plus, it would visually just look better. This is trying to do almost like angel wings with this weave pattern. And definitely it feels like the developer, the main guy who's speaking, seems to look at this game mostly from a visual perspective and getting those visuals that were in his head into the game. Because outside of the visuals of this room, there's nothing in this room. It is just the boss fight. There's no interaction, there's no story, or anything like that.
Final evaluation.
No.
Alright. So, the question now is just, can I remember what to do? I don't think you're ever going to sneak up on them, which the stealth takedown element would be something that you would do more of. See, it's got me in its sights, but I guess I'm just gonna either have to wait here. I don't know how you would really have listened to this Yeah, almost feels like the game goes easier on you the second time you try it.
Finally.
No.
You see, like, dialogue-wise, just saying no is not much. Yeah. I suppose the idea is that's supposed to be a deep, impactful no to say, I've had enough, I'm not taking this anymore. There is a visual glitch here of the hologram that's just gonna be here, I guess. This is the second visual, or the second glitch we've seen in a very short game that really doesn't have enough justification to be allowed to have even one glitch in it. It really just again shows that there's a lack of care in this. And so you're just like in this weird position where games, if they turn out to be kind of bad or kind of mediocre, there isn't anything other than the like Steam review system to protect players, and I guess YouTube video game critics like me and other video game critics in general, but most video game critics, or people that call themselves video game critics, don't play old games, and most people don't seek out reviews of old games or playthroughs of old games they haven't played before. So I could see a lot of people buying this game just because it's somewhat cheap or on sale, and then not knowing about the cliffhanger, and then not really maybe even buying the game because it has a sequel and assuming it's good because it has a sequel.
No rules bind you.
And so that gets rid of the idea of being able to lie, which we have to.
Am malfunctioning. I must save Joseph's.
Right, so that time we'll choose not to kill him, and we'll see if we get a different story that way. Yes, we did get an achievement. Merciful. Which that does imply that there might be other achievements I missed. So now we can lie to this guy and get our final point.
About time. Everyone's finally... Hey!
Welcome to a larger scale. Humans are burdened with important concerns. In these situations, assume that your actions warrant the unique...
Some of these recordings feel a little bit like a scene in Bioshock 1 where you're interacting with pre-recorded...
No, sir. I would not be foolish enough to start trouble with you. Please,
modules.
Don't hurt me. I am so sorry.
Yeah, you're sorry. Boom!
Interaction successful.
Get me another drink, and I won't mess up your ugly face.
Validated. Merit point awarded.
Okay. So, I believe you weirdly now have to walk back this way to get to the elevator, but you would think that the elevator would be right next to that.
Congratulations, you are compliant. Quantum signature archived. Proceed to the upper level where one of our diagnostic team will complete the final steps of your validation.
There is something definitely to be said about the message that's being sent here, that you have to pretend like you're complying with the rules to survive in society and succeed, yet rules are bad and stupid in general. In generalized terms, like making these messages doesn't make a lot of sense anyways, but and there really should be a more specific, narrow story that they're telling. But yeah, if their idea was that this was supposed to be about women's rights, feminism, domestication, however you would phrase that, then at the end of the game, the message is you have to play along and play the game and follow the rules, or at least bend the rules, but not get caught bending the rules. Which that doesn't create permanent solutions for sure, because then the next generation of women are still domesticated and it's still a problem. And it doesn't really cover part of the issue of rules, particularly in something like a feminist idea, is that very often once the Stockholm syndrome, for lack of a better term, sets in, women who are older or in power become self-enforcing of what is the word? I almost said masochistic, but that's not it. Chauvinistic, maybe, ideals. So the old women tell the younger women they have to follow the rules because they say so, but the older women are following the rules because some man told them they have to follow the rules or is forcing them. Certainly. And so you've got to break down systems, and you have to do it at some level openly if you're going to have lasting, permanent change.
So ARID has finally been validated, and it's not very fulfilling.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
It's empty, as she's begun moving away from conforming to someone else's rule set. The validation that would have said, you've done a good job, you've conformed to someone else's rule set, it lands so hollow now.
Yeah, completely lost all its meaning.
It's lonely.
I would somewhat disagree with this. They're not saying much, but the idea that it would have been satisfactory to have passed all these tests in the first place is wrong, because we never cared about passing the tests. All we cared about was getting to the surface of the medical and saving Joseph's, which we didn't even know about Joseph's until halfway through the game, saving a pilot. So we haven't, at this point, actually succeeded at the game or succeeded at our goal. All we've done is gotten through a couple levels by jumping through hoops that we never cared about and never were going to care about. The plants playing a role here and being shown is really just another tease. It's all just a tease. I guess maybe this elevator would have been a shortcut. And then we just have a mainframe AI that we have to talk to. And then we'll kind of quickly. You've got some backstory as far as the world building. They left me behind Levi, which we have a kitchen knife. It feels definitely like you should have been able to use a kitchen knife there to carve something into the wall. But see, this whole facility is also broken, so in having looked at the trailer for the sequel to this game, or the continuation of this game, really, it's not really a sequel, it's a continuation of an episodic game, which this is why, this is the worst example I've seen in a very long time of episodic games. At least the Telltale games, for the most part, you had all the episodes, or you had a season pass that would have given you all the episodes if you had bought it as it was being released. I have not had many experiences where you buy an episode 1 of a game and then it just does not tell a full and complete story, let alone a good story. Like, this isn't, in my opinion, a good story, but it's also definitely not a full and complete story, even if you want to argue opinions about whether it's good or not.
Welcome to Domesticon. We keep your property efficient, so you don't have
But yeah, I have no idea how
Oops, I'm sorry.
my
Our receptionist is away from the desk right now. How may I help you?
how my
I am the ARID on board a Mark 7
artificial
combat suit.
intelligence
My
would have ever
intentions
left
are
the
peaceful.
planet and
My pilot is injured and requires immediate medical
and
care.
made it to a different location, because obviously,
Medical personnel are
looking at the
stationed
trailer
through the door
for
to your
the
right.
continuation of this
Proceed.
game, the episode
Thank
2
you
of
for
this
choosing
game,
Domesticon, and have a wonderful day.
that there would be, like, there has to be some way that the helmet, which seems to be the actual AI part, connects through some kind of long-range network connection. It would be funny if there was some kind of thing you can do here, but I guess it's just they needed to tell you that there was a security droid here, so that explains where the security droid comes from that grabs you. Honestly, it doesn't need to be that way at all. Like, all the security droids could have popped up from the floor, or half the security droids could have popped up from the floor with no real explanation. Let's listen to these last couple of developer commentaries. The commentary in this game, I just don't agree with a lot of it, so I don't think it's particularly good, but it does, I guess, do the job in that it gives me an insight to the creators' minds. I just don't agree with the creators and their opinions as far as how they design this game, which inherently explains why I don't like the game.
ARID was voiced by Alison Kumar, and she is a lovely actress.
Mm-hmm.
Alison is actually a ball of emotion, which you might not get hearing ARID talk, but that was why we cast her for the part. And when working with Alison, I got her to repress her emotion, and she did it for like a week.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds very cruel, actually, but she's incredibly brave, and she wanted to go along on this journey.
She was fantastic.
And I think that really comes across in ARID and in the subtlety of Alison's performance. I can't say enough good things about her. At the very end of our recording session, she actually just burst into tears because she was finally allowed to let it all out. Beautiful, beautiful woman.
Okay. I have several problems with that. First of all, if you're hiring a voice actor and before you've even hired them through the casting process, you know them as a ball of emotion, that's a problem. Like, hiring anybody and then immediately knowing that they are so emotional that you would describe them that way means that there's probably going to be problems. And now, the voice actors are actors, so they tend to be a bit emotional in the first place. But I, as a boss, would not hire a voice actor that's a ball of emotion, because who knows what kind of fight or drama you might run into during the process of making the game, or years later even, when they come back and say, well, this person didn't treat me the way I felt I should have been treated. There have been some recent stories lately of voice actors coming back and causing trouble with games, calling for an outright boycott of Bayonetta 3 in particular. The English voice actress came out because she was unhappy with, well, pay negotiations mostly, but how she was approached during the negotiations and treated. So yeah, you want people to be professional, at least to a level in which they aren't outwardly emotional. In the same way that if you were hiring for any job, if you were hiring somebody to be a burger flipper or a CEO, if they went into the first interview and just burst into tears, you'd go, oh, this person's crazy. This person's emotionally unstable. We can't possibly put them in a position where they would have even the slightest amount of stress, because they who knows how they might flip out. Second part of that, because there's about 4 problems with it, then you have the voice actor who you hired for a specific attribute, being a ball of emotion, and then you tell them to suppress their emotions. That makes no sense. It's ridiculous and antithetical to your goal. It's insanity, for lack of a better term. But then also you have the idea of a robot that you want to be emotional, so why? Why would you want the robot to be emotional in the first place? That doesn't make good characterization. You'd want somebody kind of dull and robotic that maybe near the end you wanted it to be emotional, but they really need to question why they wanted the robot to be emotional in the first place, unless they were going to do the big reveal. And I know this is my idea I'm suggesting, so maybe I'm in love with it more than most people would. The big reveal here almost certainly should be you take off the helmet and there is a woman inside. The robot, you've been controlling a woman this whole time, and the robot suit was nothing. And maybe then the whole world shifts and it never was a sci-fi environment in the first place. It was just something happening in someone's mind, or it is still a sci-fi environment, but the suit has never been a robot. It's just been somebody who's hit their head and thought they were a robot, which is a more interesting twist than the suit is just empty. But yeah, I definitely can't agree with that casting thing. The bigger problem, though, is that why are they hiring for voice acting casting at all? This game is way, way too short. It needs at least 2 more hours of content. The content overall needs to be better. Any money they got from the Kickstarter should have been put towards making better puzzles, more of a story, just more gameplay mechanics, more environments. The visuals here, instead of being all in shadow and dark, if this was somewhat colorful and it had browns and grays and a metallic look to it more, all of that would be way, way better as a visual appearance that you're going to be able to reuse and see throughout the entirety of the game, versus a few lines of dialogue here and there. Inherently, this is probably a problem with the Kickstarter system, in that to promote more people to support the Kickstarter, they created more and more tiers that promised more and more things as far as being fully voice acted, where arguably, if you were going to kickstart a game, you probably would say, give me at least $1 million to fund this small indie game before I even start to think about kickstarting, because we're going to spend anything below $1 million in paying off programmers and animators and making the game as good as possible. In fact, it's better, frankly, to not have a Kickstarter, have a game be traditionally funded, because it just costs so much to pay people's salaries to make video games in the first place. Have it traditionally funded with no voice acting. If the game is well received and well polished, then come out with a director's cut, which that's all you really have to say is, we've added a director's cut, we've added voice acting now where there was once text. There's a lot of like really, really popular visual novels from Japan in particular that if they sold well enough, which they never really do, it would make a lot of sense to hire some English voice actors to dub it and put in English voice acting, and sell it again as a deluxe edition, as a director's cut, as a remaster or audio remaster. There's not particularly a term you would use. I think director's cut is probably the best, or sell even voice acting as DLC. for a game later after it, because it's real easy to get voice acting into a game after the fact. It's way harder to change a game's visuals and programming and what it inherently is. For the example of visual novels, when they do tend to be very popular, what they do often is turn them into animes, and then if the anime is popular enough, then you start to get a dub of the voice acting in the animated non-interactive experience. Let's see what this other one is about.
I have a pretty strong opinion about dark endings, actually. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine when a movie ends with an unhappy ending, but there's no point. I don't think we've done that here, though. I think there's actually like a lot of optimism.
Yeah, I don't know if that comes across to our audience,
I hope it does.
or if they just feel that everything sucks. But for us, journeying down to nothing, just stripping away every layer, getting completely deconstructed, and then what you're left with when you can't, I mean, it sounds cliche, but when you can't go any lower, now you can potentially really build something.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
only hope.
Yeah, ARID had to break, because her whole relationship with the rules was so clearly unhealthy that if she was going to develop as a conscious being, all of this stuff needed to collapse. Which sounds really horrific, that she would have this brutal experience, but it's kind of for the best with her long term.
Though tragedy is hard,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
Because there's something worse about never having experiences that provoke you to growth.
Man, it's just so ridiculous to have a developer hit the nail on the head and then immediately have to backtrack and say, well, we really didn't do that as far as a dark ending. Yeah, a lot of this game feels like it's supposed to be an allegory for going through deprogramming from a cult, which, why not just tell that tale? That's not an experience most people would be familiar with or would have had in the first place, so wouldn't it have made some sense to just have somebody in a cult and being deprogrammed? I'm a little surprised we don't see like a cross around this area either. Something that would imply the caretaker actually made it to this point in the game, or to this level.
Oops. I'm sorry. Our medical personnel seem to be out at this time.
I completely
Stand by
disagree
for
with the
automated
developer.
medical
I think
assessment.
this is a dark ending. I think it's fairly pointless. I think worse, it's a cliffhanger ending.
I'm sorry. There is no human present within the combat suit. Thank you for choosing Domesticon.
We did scan again before. Let's just accuse of dishonesty.
You are lying.
Oops. I'm sorry. It is outside of my operating parameters to misrepresent reality. Thank you for choosing Domesticon, and have a wonderful day.
There is some kind of mistake. Scan again.
Beginning medical evaluation. Oops. I'm sorry. There is no human present within the combat suit. Thank you for choosing Domesticon.
What would be
and
interesting
have a
if there
wonderful
wasn't
day.
a human but some other kind of life form in the suit, or if there was DNA or goo or a skeleton in the suit and the human pilot had died. Although really there just needed to be one final thing that happened where we had to kill somebody in cryostasis to get further, and when we killed that person in cryostasis, that should have been the revelation that we had killed our own pilot and the suit was empty because of that.
You are broken. You are faulty, malfunctioning.
I was recently formatted. My systems are working optimally. Thank you for choosing Domesticon, and have a wonderful day.
You
are
get
faulty. Now scan me again.
slightly different
I'm sorry. Please wait for medical
lines of
personnel.
dialogue, which
Nobody is
would kind of
coming. Everyone is dead.
require
Joseph
writing
is dead.
twice
The
as much.
system isn't registering him. I took too long.
You seem troubled. Please cease your outburst and have a wonderful day.
What's funny here is if this is supposed to be an equivalent
Security.
to a
Erratic
female,
AI medical suite.
here's the
Likely
downfall
Impossible.
of
Please power down and
of her
immediately
is her
submit for
emotional
evaluation.
output.
Nothing. Nothing binds me.
Security. Remove deviant unit for recycling.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what message you really are saying there as far as more negativity happens because the female equivalent robot, female analog robot, has an emotional outburst. The good news I would say about this game, the one thing I can say nice about this game is that they at no point make it feel like there was a timer and if you ran faster you would have saved your pilot, because that certainly could have gone very poorly. I again really need to highlight the stupidity of this just difficult to read credits, and we won't go through the whole credits. Okay, so by running through the game twice, I've had twice the experience and spent twice as much time on this game. Am I any happier on the second time through? No. Is the developer commentary good or worth playing? No. Is the game itself good and worth playing? Not really, no. I could certainly go over all the other points and think about it even more, but if you've been watching this series, you've heard what I've had to say, so there's no point in repeating myself. And yeah, there are other games like the American McGee's Alice series and Alice Madness Returns. If you want more of a woman being suppressed, woman being going through an emotional journey, you would do something like that. I imagine, I haven't played it, but Horizon Zero Dawn as a series might have those same themes, and plenty of other games might have it. If you wanted to just play as a robot, I'm sure there's plenty of puzzle games out there, and there's definitely plenty of point-and-click adventure games that would play better. Yeah, there's just nothing this game that does that's particularly well. And I can't help but wonder if part of the reason why I bought The Fall is because I just confused it with The Swapper, which was another game that came out around the same time. This game compares itself to Super Metroid and Metroidvanias. It's not that by any means. It's a shame that there aren't more good Metroidvania type games on PC, but there's quite a lot of them regardless. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely would say play Portal 1, Portal 2. That's pretty much my favorite games ever, so I would always say that, but there is a different experience there with more platforming and puzzling in Portal, and more of a bad guy that you spend a lot of time with GLaDOS in the Portal series to get to know GLaDOS and get to learn to hate GLaDOS much more than you do with the Caretaker, and it's a much longer experience. And then Portal 2 is like 3 times as long as Portal 1. And ironically, the character you play as, Chell, in Portal never speaks, so it is more of a robot character than ARID is, as far as just not being a real character or having any emotion or reactions to things. It probably would have been better if ARID very rarely reacted or communicated, and it left it in the minds of the player to determine what ARID was thinking and why it was doing anything. Anyways, I guess that's going to be it for this series. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos, because that helps me with YouTube. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. I also have a link to all my playlists, and I have a playlist for every game I've ever covered, which there's a lot of them. And then if you want to support me even further than all of that, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.